Hi, this is Robin, and this video is going to be focused on digital Gobo effects, what they are, how to create them, and how to use them to create drama, depth, and some storytelling in Photoshop. Now, Gobos complement other Photoshop tools in my special effects series or playlist on relighting photographic images. So you can look at the other videos that I've done about relighting, and this one on Gobos will work along with them. Now, Gobo, if you're not familiar with it, is an acronym for Goes Before Optics. And it's essentially a stencil that goes between your light source, in other words, the optics, and your subject when you're doing photography. And that stencil, or Gobo, casts patterns of light or shadow onto your scene or onto your subject. Now, Gobos are typically physical, photographic, or other uses accessories, so that they're physical things that are made of metal, glass, or plastic. And they're used in studio photography, in cinematography, and also in theater lighting. And when I say theater, I mean, like stage type of theater. So I'm going to show you how to create and work with digital Gobos that can achieve the same kind of effects as those physical ones that I just mentioned. Now, if you're still trying to figure out, well, what exactly is this? If you've seen movies or stage plays, you've likely seen Gobos at work. They're most widely known, I would say, for casting light or shadows that look like windows or window blinds or things like that when there is no window in a movie or on stage. They're used to cast moody or make mysterious shadows in film noir scenes, and they're also used to make interior scenes look like exteriors in things like movies or on the stage. But photographers do use them too, and so they can be used for drama and adding some more mood to a scene. They can enhance a sense of dimension or depth in a photograph, and they can also be used to enhance storytelling. So if you use specific shapes or styles, they can kind of back up what might be being told visually in the photograph. They also can maybe help convey conceptual ideas in photographs, so work in a complementary way to whatever else is being photographed. So I would say that Gobos as an effect work well in fine art photography, in portrait, wedding, commercial and product photography, as well as in fields like cinematography and theater. Now, in photography, I often will use reflectors, and some of you who do photography will probably use reflectors that are used to bounce or add light onto subjects in a scene. And I would say that Gobos are the opposite of reflectors. So they actually are subtractive. They subtract light from parts of an image in order to create a bit of, I guess, contrast is the best way to describe it. So let me, if these descriptions still aren't clicking, let me just show you with this image here what I'm talking about. So we have this photo of a model in a studio. Obviously, it's just against a plain backdrop, and I have created some digital Gobos to put behind her and cast onto the background. So these are the kinds of things that I'm going to be talking about in this video, of things like this that you can create and use in your photography. So here's one I've created in which you can give the sense of a vertical, or a Venetian blind rather, or window blinds if you don't call them Venetian blinds. And again, it's just made doing using shapes like rectangles and repeating them. So you get the sense that the window's over here and the light is being cast through it and onto the wall. So here's another one that I made. This is more of a residential window. And you'll notice as I'm showing these that you can certainly shape them, transform them, make them go in any direction that you want them to. Normally, I would say that if you want it to look realistic, If there is light coming onto your subject from a certain direction, then probably you want your gobo to match that direction. Or if there's a certain perspective in the scene, you probably want to match that perspective with your gobo. But you certainly can go rogue and be creative and do whatever you want in your own imagery. Okay, so that's what I'm calling a residential window, with the window panes being cast. So again, it's not supposed to look like the window. It's supposed to look like the light that the window is shining onto the background. Here's one that I said gives more of an industrial window over here somewhere look, so with the more horizontal look to it. Here's one I made with a window with a more rounded top. And again, after you make these, you can make them as narrow, as tall, as short, as blurred as you want. You have all kinds of flexibility to do with them as you will, so to speak. And then here's one that's sort of more of a glass door. So again, you can place them whatever you want. You can make whatever shapes you want, because these were all ones that I just custom designed. And again, in the first demo, I'll show you how you can create things like this. I'll give you a base one, and you can improvise from there based on the process to follow. And then here's another way to use a gobo, or another type of gobo. You can also use vector art or illustrations as a background to a subject. So again, that shape would be as a stencil put in front of the light and then cast onto the wall, but you're doing it here digitally in Photoshop. And of course, with any of these, you can make them as opaque and dark or as subtle and light as you want. So once you make something like this, for instance, you can lower the opacity and just make it a lot more subtle. There you go. Okay. So that is what I wanted to give you a sense of about how the gobos work and what they are. Oh, and I even gave her a ghostly effect, so that's kind of cool too. All right. So the benefits, I'd say, of using the digital gobos versus physical gobos are a few. So first of all, you don't have to buy expensive studio strobes and use studio lights if you're going to be creating digital gobos versus casting light by using some kind of manipulation in Photoshop. Also, if you're even just thinking, well, I'm not going to buy a studio strobe, I have a continuous LED light. Well, the benefit of the digital gobo over that is then you don't have to think about how to balance your shutter speed and ISO for a perfect exposure using that continuous light. So, it takes that off the table for you. Gobos are very expensive if you get good ones versus generic low-end ones. And if you get custom ones that are designs that you specifically want, you're really going to pay a lot for those metal, glass, or plastic gobos, the physical ones I talked about. And the thing with those is, even though some of them are really much more durable materials than other, if you are using hot lights with them, which you will be, they will wear out. You only get so many uses out of them. So with the digital gobo, you're not going to be paying to replace the things that were expensive in the first place. Because the gobo goes between your light and your subject, the physical ones, with the digital gobo, you don't have to figure out how close to place that gobo to the light or to your subject to achieve the effect that you want. You can just move it around on a Photoshop layer and then just tweak it to your taste. So it's not like, oh, I didn't capture it in camera, I have to go back and do this whole setup again either. So you've just got it there. And then the final one that, at least comes to my mind quickly here is that, as I mentioned, I had already done some videos on my channel in the series on special effects on how to use things like the lens flare filter and the lighting effects filter to relight images and create relighting effects. So something like a digital gobo that I'm going to be discussing and demonstrating in this video is very easy to combine and complement with those other kinds of filters. Okay, so that's the background that I wanted to give you about gobos and the introduction to gobos. So the rest of the video then, I will show you how to create and use digital gobos. And again, they won't be for every image, but they can be a cool effect, I think, when you want to use them or think that you have a place for them. So that's the lead up now, the housekeeping stuff. So first of all, for those of you who do want to keep up to date on my content as I release it, you can click the subscribe button and the black bell icon that's below this video, and then YouTube will send you a single heads up notification to let you know when I release new content. Subscribing is free. It basically just means follow me. If you have subscribed already, you're all set. You only need to do it once, so you do not need to do it again. The other things are related to the description below the video. So I will include links to related workshops on my channel that might have something to do with things that I do not want to go into a lot of redundant detail about in this video here. So things like selections and refining selections, things like converting images to black and white. I do have other tutorials on those things, so I will include links to them if you need some more refresher on how to do those things. I am going to try something for the first time, which is to try to attach some bonus content. So I created a couple of Gobo pngs that you can experiment with, and I'm going to put a link in that description below the video to those pngs so that you can grab them and try to play with them. This is the first time I'm trying that kind of thing, so if there's any issues with accessing them, maybe just leave me a quick note in the comments and I'll see if I can untangle what's going on. I actually used Google Drawings to make those Gobos just so that I would have the links to be able to share with you. So we'll see how that works out. Also, I will list the start times for each of the video topics in the description, so you can hop around in this video as well. So let me close this out. I'm going to pause the video and bring up the images for the first demo. Okay, so now we are moving into demo number 1, and there's only going to be 2 demos in this video. So in this demo, what I wanted to try to do was show you how to create a Gobo, a digital Gobo, made up of repeating shapes, and project it onto just the background like we had behind the model in the introduction to this video. So the image that I'm going to be working with is this still life on a table here, and actually this is a stock photo, but it's not a straight stock photo, so I actually used some of the relighting effects from Photoshop to light the candle and to put some of the spotlight and soft lighting on the original stock image. So that's what I wanted to say and point out before, is you can definitely use these Gobo effects to complement other lighting effects that are in Photoshop. Okay, so the first thing we want to do before we work on anything in Photoshop that I recommend is duplicate your background layer here in your layers panel. You can either do a Control or Command J from this background layer, or click on it and drag it down to the bottom of the layers panel to the Add New Layer icon, that box with the plus, and you get a background layer to work on. So now, because I said I want my Gobo to be projected onto the background and not onto foreground elements like the bowl of fruit, the table, the book, etc., I am going to select the subject that I want the Gobo to go behind so I can bring it up to the top of the layers stack and put the Gobo behind it. So I want to select this bowl of fruit because the Gobo will go on the wall behind here. For me to do that, and again, you're not going to be working with this image, but whatever object you want to have your Gobo go behind, do the same process. So I've got my toolbar docked here on the right. I'm going to use the object selection tool, which is this box with the arrow heading into it. Click on that. Be sure you see the black behind there. And then this green is just my highlighter so you can see where I am. So I'm just going to draw a loose line selection around the bowl of fruit that I want to be in front of any Gobo projections onto the backdrop. And be sure you connect the ends, let Photoshop do its thing. It's made a selection, okay? Now, the thing I wanted to just say to you is, because this is about Gobos and not about making selections, I'm not going to spend time refining this, but you may, for yours, want to spend some time to refine the edges that you've created in your mask, in your selection, sorry. So you could go up to select and mask and click on that and go into the select and mask interface. And this is where I said I do have other videos about making selections and refining selections, so I'll include the links to them in the description below. So I am not going to do that. But with your active selection, then press Control or Command and J to jump your selection up to its own layer. So if you look here in the right hand layer stack, now I've got, let me turn this off so you can see, I've got that bowl of fruit on its own layer, and it's all transparent pixels. So anything where this transparency is from lower in the layer stack will show through. Okay, I'm going to label this as bowl of fruit. All right, so now we've got that on its own layer. So now we need to create another layer below that where the gobo can be placed. So we come back to our background copy layer, click on that, be sure it's highlighted and active. Again, come to the bottom of the layers panel to that add new layer icon, that box with the plus, and left click on that, and we get an empty layer. And this empty layer is going to be the digital gobo that we're going to create. Okay. So now we're going to keep that highlighted and working on that layer. So as I said, we're constructing a digital gobo in this particular demo. So what I'm going to do is make it look like a residential window, like one of the ones I just showed you in the introduction. You can make it any shape and design you want, but you can follow the same kind of process that I'm going to show if you have repetitive shapes in yours. So even if you're using different shapes, you can use the same key sequences and same process. So I am going to make, for the window I'm doing, click on this rectangular marquee tool, come out over here onto my empty layer, which we can see the image through because it's transparent. And I'm just going to pull out what I'm calling a window pane. Okay, so that's representing one of the panes in a window of 2, 4, 6 panes, let's say. So we've got our selection there. Now, because I want white being shining through from a window that's off left, camera left here somewhere, onto this backdrop, I want to fill this with white because I want white to be on my black background. You can do the inverse. If you have a light background and you want something shadowy showing on your background, then fill your thing, your gobo design, with black. Okay, so with that active, I'm going to press Shift and the backspace, and I think it's the delete key on a Mac, hopefully that's right, and that'll bring up this fill box. And as I said, you have your choice of different things you can choose from, and I'm going to fill my box with white because I want white shining onto the backdrop, and click OK. All right, so now we have a selection filled with white and something representing one pane of glass. So now what we want to do is start repeating this pattern without having to keep drawing freehand the pattern over and over again. So I'm going to press and hold the Control or Command, Alt and Up or Option, and T key, and then release. And what that key sequence has done, Control or Command, Alt or Option, and T, is said to select that and transform it. So you can see it's changed because we no longer just have the marching ants, we now have this pink bounding box with handles that lets us transform. Now I want to drag this pane out to the right because, like in a typical residential window, there might be 2 panes. If there's 3, you can do 3, but again, I'm just showing it with 2 panes across. So I'm pressing and holding the Shift key, and then I'm going to click inside on this white area, not on the widget in the center, and just pull across, okay? And the reason I'm pressing the Shift key is that, and then you can release once you get it where you want. The reason I'm pressing the Shift key is that in Photoshop, when you press the Shift key and move something, it will move it in a straight line. So that lines it up, and same thing vertically or horizontally. Once you get this pulled out to where you want, you click your, I believe it's Enter on mine, it might be Return on a Mac, to accept that transformation, and then Control or Command D to get rid of the marching ants. So right now on this digital Gobo layer, we have these two panes of this window. So again, to be more efficient, let's just keep copying what we have already created as building blocks instead of starting over again. So we're going to press Control or Command and keep it depressed, and then click on this thumbnail, the digital Gobo thumbnail, and look now back here at the image, and you can see what it has done, because we had both of those things in there, is made both of those selections active again. You can see the marching ants around both of them. So now with both of those shapes active, I want to repeat the process that I just went through and showed you so that we can transform these two and continue to build this window. So again, press and hold Control or Command, Alt or Option, and T. And again, now it's put the bounding, but it's selected them both and put the bounding box around both of them. So now I want to move vertically to create this window that I'm building, the Gobo I'm building. You do whatever design you want. So again, press the Shift key because we want to pull this down in a straight direction. Click inside, but not on the widget, and just pull in whatever direction you want to go with it. So again, you know, there's those dividers on Windows, so I'm leaving the spaces between. Okay, so again, we've got that in the direction that we wanted. I'm going to click Enter or Return to accept that transformation. And then what I want to do is repeat what I've just created in these past two steps. So the way to do that is slightly different because now it's got some muscle memory, if you will. So we're going to press Shift, Control or Command, Alt or Option, and T. And look at that, it just repeats it for you. So that was a really handy way to do that. And then because we have the marching ants active, you can do a Control or Command D to stop the marching ants. So you can see where that can save you a lot of time if you do these step and repeat processes. So maybe you, at least until you get it down, if you're not familiar with those key sequences, you can write them down. And as I said, you could do this with ovals. You could go off in different directions than I did. You could do all horizontal. You could do 3 panes, whatever design you want to do for your Gobo. If you have repeating shapes, those are the kinds of steps that you can use with them. You also, if you like, can make shapes and then just move them with your Move tool over here, the cross on the top of the toolbar. So you can work with it, whatever tools are at your disposal in Photoshop to do this. Okay, so now you have what I would call the original Gobo. This is the original base shape to cast a what I'll call residential window. So let me put that in the label here in the right. Residential, I'll abbreviate it, window, digital Gobo. Okay, now the thing is, you might want to be able to use this to cast a window shape into other images. If you don't alter or transform this layer and save this as its own file, you can reuse it and reuse it. So what I actually have is a folder called Digital Gobos on my computer. And I just have made all those different shapes and I save them. And all I have to do is if I want to use one of them in another image, I just have to open that file, use the Move tool, move it into that image, and then adjust it to suit my taste and whatever seems right for that image. So to be able to keep this original pristine, let's drag this down. So click on that layer with the Gobo down to the bottom of the Layers panel to the Add New Layer icon, and we get the copy. Okay, let's turn off the original. And I'm going to just alter this, just so you know, if you're looking at this again for reference, that this is the original. And I'm turning it off so it's not visible. We're going to work on the copy, and then we can, if it does a couple things. So it gives you that, what I always call insurance. So if you mess something up in this image, you can always throw out that layer and duplicate this layer again and keep going. You don't have to start over. It also gives you the flexibility to be able to use this Gobo on other images. Okay, so with this copy layer active, the first thing I think that I want to do is start altering it or distorting it in some way. So these are some options that you have. So I'm going to go up to the Edit menu, come down to Transform, and you could use Free Transform if you want. I just like to use Transform because it's got some of these things here where you can see it. And I'm going to click on Perspective. So Edit, Transform, Perspective, and you get the pink bounding box with these handles that let you drag and change the shape. So I'm going to put this up a little. We're on Perspective, so I'm trying to kind of parallel the line of the table here. And again, your real window would be out here in real life, casting light onto this wall. So you kind of think about, where would the walls be in your image? Where are there shapes that you want to parallel? Things like that. And let me just pull this up just a little bit just to show you that you can pull on different handles. Okay, so that's a perspective transformation. Then you can click your check mark if that's all you wanted to do at the top of the interface. Let's say, all right, I maybe want to make this a little bit bigger, wider, and taller. So Edit, Transform. Let's go to Distort this time. Get your bounding box again. If you want to go wider, you could click on one of these middle handles and just pull. And again, you can see that because your object that you copied is on the top, this is staying in the background where you wanted it to be, cast on your background. Okay, and then if I want to make this taller, I will click on this center handle here and just pull down. All right, so let's say that that's good enough, just to show you that you can do any kind of transformations that you want. Once you get your transformations the way you like them, then come to the top of the interface and click on that check mark to accept it, and the pink bounding box will go away. Now, this is pretty extreme. In most situations, you would not see a window light being cast onto a wall and looking that sharp-edged. So the next thing I want to do is add some blur or softness to this. So I'm going to come up to the top of the interface to the Filter menu, come down to where it says Blur, and then come out to the flyout to Gaussian Blur. So Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Left click on that, you get the Gaussian Blur pop-up box. And I always keep mine checked on preview so I can see what happens. And if you're not familiar with Gaussian blur, the more the slider is to the left, the less blur. The more it is to the right, the more blur. So you can just move this slider to your taste to get it to whatever level of blur you think is appropriate for your scene. So again, this is not supposed to be the window. This is supposed to be the cast light from the window, okay? So for me, I'm going to leave mine there and click OK. Once you get yours really, click OK. So that's sort of the base, you're done kind of thing. So you've built a Gobo, you've duplicated it so that you can make some alterations, you've distorted it or transformed it in some way, and you have softened it. Now you have some other options you can do here. So, and you didn't have to do that if you wanted to. So in this layers panel, first of all, the first thing you can come down to is where it says normal, go to the down arrow. These are blend modes. So if you like, you can try hovering, just mouse over them, hover over them, and see if any of, for the one you're doing, whether darken, multiply, lighten, screen, overlay, or soft light are usually the best ones, help and enhance the scene or enhance the Gobo in any way that you want to. For me, I'm not seeing it's benefiting, so I'm going to leave that alone. I'm not going to change the blend mode. You can also come right adjacent to there to opacity, and two ways you can use it. You can either left click on the word opacity and drag left, which is what I like to do, or you can click on this little down arrow and pull the slider. So I'm going to just left click on opacity and see if I can make this a little more subtle as a cast light. Yeah, so I like that better for me, okay? And I'm going to leave it a little darker than I might for my own thing, just so it's easy to see on the video. So again, I feel pretty good that I've given the impression that a window is casting light into this scene. It, you know, has added some interest, I think, to the scene. And that you could stop right there. The only other things to keep in mind with this are, and it depends on how realistic or surrealistic or fantasy-like you want to be. So if you want to be realistic and you're doing something like making a gobo that's a window, then maybe think about, well, what is supposed to be outside this window? And especially in cinematography, you have to think of these things, but in photography too. So would it be a blue sky, sunny day outside? If so, probably there'd be a hint of blue coming in from the window that might get cast into this light that is reflecting onto the wall behind this still life. So you might want to add a hint of blue to that. My personal taste is that there's a lot of warm, you know, yellows, reds, and oranges and things, like a lot of warm light and colors in this scene. So I personally would prefer to warm this up a little because I don't want it to become distracting as too cool of a white back there. So what I'm going to do and show you, so you can think about it if you want to do it with your gobos too, is add a hue and saturation layer. So coming to the bottom of the layers panel, to the circle with the line through it, to the adjustment layer icons, add adjustment layer, come down to where it says hue and saturation. Left click on that, and it has now added a hue and saturation layer above your gobo layer that you're working on. Now, I only want the color that I'm going to add in hue and saturation to be applied to this gobo effect. If I don't do something special, it's going to apply to the whole image. So what I want to do is clip, so that's C-L-I-P, clip this hue and saturation layer to the gobo layer. So the colors I affect here will only affect the gobo. And there's a couple ways you can do that. So in the properties panel for this hue and saturation layer, my properties panel is down here, yours might be at the top. Come to the bottom of the properties panel, and there's this little square with the down arrow icon. You could click on that, or you can do what I prefer to do, which is press and hold the Alt or Option key, and then see where my mouse is here on the right, where inside there's the pointer finger is the mouse. I'm just going to slowly scroll up till I get to the intersection or the line that divides between these two layers. And when it gets there, you get that same little icon with the box with the down arrow. When you see that, left click, and now you have this little down arrow right here showing that now the hue and saturation layer is clipped to your digital gobo. So the colors should only affect the digital gobo. Something else to keep in mind. This is white. Hue and saturation will not work on white or black unless in this properties panel you click on this little box that says colorize. So you have to click for colorize if you want to add color to a white or a black, okay? So now let's see if we can start adding some colors here. There we go. All right, so again, if you wanted to make it look like you had the sky there, you can do the blue, and I've got this all cranked up with the saturation, so needless to say, you could lower that, you could add more brightness, you know, so there's your sky coming in, okay? If I, for mine, want to make it a little bit warmer to match this scene here, I can make it, so you can adjust the saturation to taste, and you can adjust the darkness, or the brightness, the lightness to taste. So I just want it to be a hint. I don't want somebody's eyes being too drawn back there. I just want it to enhance what's in my scene. So that now has taken us from our original image to the cast light on the backdrop that gives it a nice sort of complementary warm light. So that is all I wanted to show you about creating the gobo. Now, again, keep in mind one other thing I guess to mention here. I have created it over here and left it over here. But if you want, you can click on your gobo layer right here where it's labeled. That's why I like to label things. And use your Move tool from the toolbar. So that's the cross. Click on that. And you can see the bounding box. Click anywhere except, so not on the widget. And you can move this around. So if you say, oh, I really prefer this over here, or maybe you can duplicate that layer and make multiples and just have them go across the whole scene. So you can put this wherever you want with the Move tool once you have it in place. And then I'll turn the Move tool off so that it doesn't move something accidentally. So you have a lot of flexibility, as I said, and which is why it's nice not to have to work with the real physical gobos. You have all this flexibility to manipulate, transform, adjust, soften, and you don't have to keep going and fiddling with physical lighting accessories to get the same kind of effects. Okay, so that is it for creating the gobo and then working with it. Now, one other thing before I leave this image, I'm going to turn off all this eye visibility on these, and we're going to go back to the original gobo layer. So I'm going to put the visibility back on that. There's the original one I created, and I'm going to click on that layer to make sure it's active. So with all of these other eyes turned off, this layer active, and the eye turned on with the original gobo, I would recommend that you save your original digital gobos that you create, put them in the file that I told about, and save them with the descriptive file name, and then you can just open them as files and reuse them as other images, so you're not reinventing the wheel. So with this layer active, you can come up to the upper left, File, Save As, left click, and then wherever you want to put yours, so let's say I want to put it on the desktop or something, and I'm not going to bother to save mine, but I just want to show you. So I can take out the name of the original image there, and let's just call this Residential Window Gobo. Okay, so that's where I'm describing it, and you might want it in yours, just so you know. So if you have multiple types of windows, residential 6-pane window, or be as descriptive as you want to be. Okay, and don't save yet. So that's the file name. Then the type you want to save as is a PNG. So come across to the down arrow, scroll down, and PNG is right there. So left click, and that adds that PNG file extension, and you want to save it as PNG. I am not going to save it because I already have other gobos of this style in here that I don't need to save. But you would just hit save and save it to wherever you want to save it on your computer. And then you can reuse that gobo. So I would say that for me then, that is the end of demo number 1, where we have created a digital gobo that we've constructed using geometric shapes, and you can use whatever shapes you want. We transformed it, we altered it, we moved it around, and we cast it only on the background by putting part of the original image, making a selection of it and putting it on the top layers so that it would be blocking part of the gobo. So let me pause the video, I'll close this out, and then we'll move on to demo number 2, where we're using an already existing photograph as a gobo and not constructing one. All right, so now we are ready for demo number 2. And in this demo, I wanted to show how to use gobos to add to a mood or give some subtle drama to a scene or just add some general interest. So I'm going to work with these 2 images. So this is a stock photo of this guy in a cafe, and this is a photo that I took of some trees because I liked all the branches and I wanted to be able to use those branches as a gobo to cast a branch shape onto other images. So since it was wintertime when I took this, there's not a lot of leaves, so it gives you some nice shapes, and it definitely will read tree if you cast those shapes onto a background. Okay, so that's what I'm going to be working with here. This should be a faster process because we do not have to construct the gobo from various shapes. Now, as I said, I shot this image and I shot it in full color, and then I converted it to black and white so that I could use it with blend modes in Photoshop. So if you want to do the same thing, I suggest that you take whatever photos you want, either of shapes, of trees, of other natural elements, flowers, whatever it is you want to use as a gobo, convert it to a pure black and white. And if you don't know how to do that, I do have other videos on the channel. I will put a link to the how to convert an image to black and white there too. But just simply and quickly, in the bottom of your layers panel, you can use the black and white adjustment layer as a really good method to make photos black and white. Okay, so again, we're focused on gobos here and not on conversions of images, so I'll put that pointer in the description. So again, you can use any photo that you shoot. You can get stock images. Also, you can use, as I showed you with the original introduction, vectors for geometric shapes and things like that if you want to use them as gobos too, so just feel free. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, as I said, first of all, before I work with anything, I duplicate my layers. So on this one, I'm going to click on this layer, drag it to the bottom of the layers panel to the add new layer icon, the box with the plus. And for this image, I'm going to do a Control or Command J to jump that up to its own duplicate layer. So either one of those methods will work. Now I'm going to click on the Move tool, which is the top of the toolbar here. It's that thing that looks like a cross. Come over to this tree picture, and I'm going to click here anywhere except any widgets and just drag this over. So I'm depressing my mouse and just dragging this onto this image, and they're not going to match size-wise, so I'm just going to click OK. All right, so we can see that we've got this here. It's obviously way too big for this image, so that I want to put it on top of to resize and scale and not destroy the image integrity by reducing pixels by scaling up and down. I'm going to right-click on this layer and convert this to a smart object. Just click on that, and you can see it's a smart object because it has that new little widget down in the corner of that. Now I want to make this picture a little bit smaller, but it's off the screen, so I'm going to press Control or Command and 0 so that you have full visibility, and then I'm going to press and hold the Shift key and pull this in. Now, a footnote on that. I am still using the legacy Photoshop method of rescaling and retaining the aspect ratio when I'm rescaling. And that legacy method is to press the Shift key as you click and pull on one of these handles. If you're using the newer default method, then all you have to do is click and pull diagonally to resize. You do not have to press Shift. But I'm going to press Shift and drag diagonally to make this. I think I'll just make it the size of the image, and I'm not going to worry about making it perfect. I'm just trying to show you the process, okay? All right, so once I get that on there, then come to the top of the interface and click on the check mark to accept that transformation, and I'm going to get off of the Move tool, and then we're going to make this bigger again so we can see what we are doing. Okay, so I got my Gobo image overlaid, and so this is going to be a tree Gobo, and it's black and white. Okay, and it's overlaid, and what I want to do is have it, and I think what I will do is rasterize this so I don't need to worry about it. So right click again in that empty area and rasterize. Once I get it to the size I like to rasterize it again so I don't have any issues. So now I want to get it so that just the black branches and any leaves that are here, whatever, the trunk, are being cast into the scene, which means we have to get rid of the white. I did not want to just make a selection of the black. I think it'll get messier and it's harder to do it. What we're going to try to do instead is to use a blend mode. So in the layers panel, come down to where it says normal and go over to the little down arrow, and these are the blend modes. And so you can just, again, just hover over them so that darken gives me the kind of effect I want with the dark shadowy branches on the wall and on the chair and coming in. So the tree would be out here on the street, and a street light is casting the shadows of these branches in. That's my story for this. All right, multiply to me is bringing it back too much. Lighten is definitely not what we want. Screen is definitely not what we want. So if your shapes were white and your background was black, then you'll have better luck with lighten and screen. Overlay is not going to work in this situation. You can see that what's happening here is we're still getting the white box from the background, so that's not going to work. Ditto for soft light, it's just more subtle, but it would retain your white box. So the best for me were darken and multiply to me looks too complicated and complex, so I'm going to go with darken blend mode. Okay, so we've got that darken blend mode, so we've eliminated that white background that we don't need in this image. We're trying to make it look like there are shadows being cast here. So another thing you can do with this while this layer is still active, again, come to the edit menu at upper left, go down to transform. I think I want to rotate this a little bit and see. I'm just going to look and see where the branch shapes are falling, and I'm just doing it by eye. There's no method or madness to this. This is strictly personal taste. Okay, and I'm going to leave mine like that and not get too perfectionist because you won't be working with this image anyway. So I will click the check mark once I get this transformed the way I want. By the way, when you do rotate, let me just turn that back on again if you're not familiar with it, rotate. So you can, let me make this smaller so you can see. You would pull your, see the little two-headed arrow inside my green highlighter there? So just position it out there and just move it from there and it would work in there. Okay, so let's cancel that, and I'm going to make this a little bigger so we can see what we're doing with him. Okay, so needless to say, it's not so great that this Gobo is over his face and over parts of the image that we don't want it to be. So on that same Gobo layer, we want to block out the areas where we don't want the Gobo to be. So bottom of your layers panel, come down to this box with the circle, which is to add a layer mask, and click on that, and now you have a layer mask. So because that layer mask is white, it's showing everything that's been added from those tree branches. So we're just going to paint with black to hide. Black hides, white reveals the things that we don't want the branches to show up. So make sure your mask is active and has the white frame around it. Don't paint on your Gobo. Come to your toolbar. Yours might be on the left side, mine is docked right. Click on the paintbrush tool, which looks like a brush, and we want to paint on that white mask with black, so make sure that black is your foreground color. So again, just to show you here, the green is my highlighter, the white is the brush. So if I hit the left bracket key, I can make my brush smaller. You can click the white bracket key to make the brush bigger. So I'm going to start painting away areas where I don't want the branches. Okay. And again, the idea is just to make it look like there is a tree out on the street and it's projecting, it's sending, the light beams are coming through it from a street light, and the shadows from the tree are getting shown into the cafe. And this is a little bit too intense with this branch, so I'm just going to take that away. And you can always doctor later and repeat the process and put some of the smaller branches where you want them and then mask out the ones you don't want. So you can do what you like with that. All right, and I'm going to take away some of this. Okay, realistically, there would be some on the bench, so, but I'm not going to repeat. I'm not going to rinse and repeat. I'll just show you the basic steps. All right, I'll get it off of the chair leg. All right, and I'm feeling pretty good about where that is. Let me get some of this out of here. And I try to get rid of big glumps of things because that would become somebody's eye would go to that. And so you don't want distractions because, again, you want the focus on him. It's supposed to subtly enhance the scene that he's in. All right, so let me make this a little smaller. All right, so I have created my mask here and masked away areas where I don't want this gobo showing. And I've said that I may replicate it in real life. I would replicate it and maybe get it on the seat and parts of the back of the banquette here, but I'm not going to bother with that now. So we've created this mask that's blocking out where we don't want those branches to show up. Now it's way too dark. So the next thing I would consider doing, I don't think you can see, depending on what you're doing and what effect you want, if you're doing something with nature and natural things and branches, honestly, I think I don't like this branch here. It's just bothering me. Okay. If you're doing something with nature and natural things and you maybe want to give a sense that a wind is blowing and that's part of the story outside and that's why they're taking shelter in this cafe or something, well then if you want to give this a bit of a blur, then you could go to filter, blur, and I would use a motion blur and specify the direction of the motion. So let me just show you. So let's say the wind is blowing like crazy from a diagonal and maybe there's a storm outside and it's raining too. Well, then you would just adjust this little widget here to the direction that you want the blur to be. And then you can adjust how blurred or not it is, okay? But I don't think that that blur is really going to add to this scene for my situation, so I'm going to cancel, but I just wanted to give that to you as a suggestion if you want to use it on your Gobo. I think for mine, what I'm going to try to just do is top of the layers panel, come over, we already have our blend mode. I'm just going to click on the word opacity and pull left and lessen the opacity of this. And I'm just going to I do it in small spurts till I see it's where I want. Yeah, so that's getting me closer. So again, it's just giving that hint of the street light is shining behind the tree and it's casting some light into the cafe, and think logically where the light, again, the light is coming, look at his face. So the light is coming from this direction and you can see the chair and you can see where the light's coming from. So the shadows are coming in this direction. Okay, and it will fade out as you go further right. So if you like, you can even use a gradient to try to blur that out, okay? But for mine, I think that's fine. It would be some drop off. So hopefully you can see the level of the shadow that's being cast there. And I think it just adds some interest, but you don't have to do that. And it just depends, again, on the story that you're trying to tell. Now, some other effects that you could use, I'm going to pause this again and bring up two more images of pre-made things that you can use for gobos, or if you can't get your own image like I did, I shot my own image for the tree, what options you have in Photoshop to try to create it if you don't have someplace you can go get good pictures of trees or you're not finding what you want on stock. So let me pause this for a moment and I'll bring up just a couple other things here. Okay, so this is part of the same demo, but I just wanted to show you as an alternative to having something like the photo I shot of the tree, other effects you can get to use as gobos from inside Photoshop. So I've got my layer duplicated, come up to filter, come down to render, and come out to clouds, okay? Doesn't that look great? So what you can do with that then is, and I'm going to duplicate this layer just to play with this. So then you can try adding a blend mode and see what that does for you. So again, just hover over them and see if that does anything. So that's not doing anything for me on these. Okay. So the blend mode, whoops, sorry, the blend mode here. There we go. make sure you're on the right layer for the Gobo if you're applying the blend mode. So here's overlay, and that's kind of intense. Soft light, so that gives you kind of a nice, more subtle clouds being projected onto the wall look, and you can lower the opacity if you like to add some interest. Okay, so you do that. And then what I would do is, I don't want the clouds on him. So come back to this background layer. With that layer active, go to your object selection tool, right here, the box with the arrow, and then click on select subject. So object selection tool, then select subject. If you have an older version of Photoshop, you can use your quick selection tool instead to select him. Okay, so once you get your subject selected that you don't want covered by the Gobo, come to the bottom of the layers panel, to the add layer mask icon, which is that box with the circle. There you get your mask. Then you can just left click on that and drag it up to the cloud layer. And now this is doing the reverse of what you want, because in Photoshop, again, with masks, what is white will show and what is black will hide. So we're hiding the clouds and showing him. So with that mask active and the white frame around it, go to the properties panel for that layer, click invert. And so now we've got the white showing the background with the clouds and the black blocking the clouds out from him. So again, then you can get that kind of an effect if you want to add some cloud sort of look to a scene. So again, that was from filter, render, clouds. Now, the other thing I mentioned is if you can't get out easily to get your own shots of nature, whether it's trees or bushes or plants or whatever, and you're not finding what you want in stock, there is a tool in Photoshop that you can go to, again, filter, render, tree. So let's click on that. Oops. There we go. Here we go. And so with this tree pop-up box, you can create and basically design your own trees and nature elements. So if you look here where it says base tree type and then keep sliding across to this down arrow. So this is a Zelkova serrata that is showing here. If you come to this down arrow, you can see there's oak trees, redwoods, maples, aspens, pines. So there's all these different kinds of trees. There's a foliage plant, there's a stylized tree. So you can pick the base kind of tree that you want to work with. I don't know, let's say we want to work with a maple, and then it'll come up as your base tree. Then you have these different sliders that you can customize your base tree. So let's say, okay, in your image, the light direction you want coming from the right. So that's to the right there. If you want it coming from the other direction, then you slide the slider to the direction where you want the light coming from. This has a lot of leaves. You can do fewer leaves by sliding that. You can do a ton of leaves by pulling it to the right. Okay. So again, to get closer to the branchy kind of look that I had, you'd have to strip it down. The leaf size, you can make them bigger leaves, or you can go very small and branchy. So you see, you can create your own empty wintry branches if you need to. Branches height. So this is how far up on the tree or how low on the trunk of the tree they are. So if you put them up, it's going to be way at the top. If you put them down low, it's going to start lower on the tree. And then the branches thickness. You can see you can do it very wispy or thick. So again, you can basically design the tree you want, and then you have your choice of leaves as well. So you can really go crazy designing a tree. And then once you get a tree that you like, again, just like what I said with the Gobo, where I recommended that maybe you save it. So this is another Gobo that you're designing. So I would say to save this also to that same Gobo, digital Gobo folder that I suggested you create. And you can come to where where it says preset here in this box, click the down arrow, and you can save your preset. And again, I suggest giving it a descriptive name. So I just put my initials, then I put the kind of base tree that it was, and then I put a description. So the one I saved, I had a few leaves, moderate-sized branches. So I think the more descriptive you are, especially if you're saving a bunch, then it'll make it easier for when you come back in and want to reuse it and see your lists of your presets that you've saved, then you'll know which one you want to pick more easily. Okay, so that is another tool that you have at your disposal to build gobos, digital gobos, inside of Photoshop. So I'm going to cancel out of that. So I think, there's some wonderful things that you can do with these and give some wonderful effects. And I said, if you can make your own tree, then we're really kind of blowing Joyce Kilmer's poem about who can make a tree right out of the water with Photoshop too. So in summary, that's the end of demo number 2 and the end of the demos for this topic on how to make and use digital gobos. So what I covered in this video was I explained in the introduction what a gobo is, what it's used for, and the benefits of using one. I showed in the first demo how to construct a custom digital gobo effects from repeating shapes. I demoed and talked about ways to use black and white photos of objects that you take or that you get from stock sources, whether it's Adobe Stock, Unsplash, Pixabay, any of those other free sites. Or you can even use graphics and vector illustrations as gobos too, to add gobo effects to images. I pointed out a couple different Photoshop render filters that could be useful as gobo source designs, both the clouds and the tree. And I'm also going to add some links to both some other videos of mine that teach you how to do either selections or converting images to black and white, or I'm going to try, fingers crossed, to add a link or two to a couple of digital gobos that I created as PNGs for you to be able to play with if you didn't want to try to just build your own until you feel comfortable working with them or using them. So I hope you have fun experimenting with creative uses for digital gobos, whether you're casting them only onto the background or over a scene, and just experiment and have fun. Take care.